shined. Let me know when we're ready. Good evening. It's Wednesday night, and my name is Keith Brandt, and I'm the pastor of the Monroe Street Christian Church in Los Angeles. Actually, we're part of Hollywood. We're right near the Vermont exit on the 101 freeway. So if ever you're in our neighborhood on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday evening, we'd love to have you. Our service on Sunday is at 11, and the service on Wednesday night is at 7 p.m. Bless you. We are starting a new book this evening, the book of Ruth from the Old Testament. And this book is named after its leading character. And Ruth was the great-grandmother of King David. Think about that when we begin this story. That's who she became. And she's listed, she is the word they have in the commentary is she's the ancestress. In other words, she is related to the Lord Jesus Christ through the line of Mary. And so it's wonderful to see where this story is going to lead. The author is unknown, although Jewish tradition points to Samuel. This is unlikely, the commentator says, because the mention of David is found in the 4th chapter, the 17th and the 22nd verse. So that implies a later date, because Samuel was alive at the time David was, but then Samuel died. And so it's doubtful that he was the author. The literary style of the Hebrew used suggests it was written during the monarchy, probably sometime after 1000 BC. Now that would be BCE as time is reckoned today, but I think everybody understands what BC and AD is. Let's begin in the 1st chapter. Now it came about in the days when the judges governed, and there was a famine in the land. So we're talking about the land of the kingdom of Judah. And Judah was comprised of all of the 12 tribes of Israel as far as being the intermarriages that were made. But during this time, and it was for all of Israel, the judges were ruling. This is before Israel had a king that this story takes place. So that's before King David and such. But it says, now it came about in the days when the judges governed that there was a famine in the land, and certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn into the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. Now the land of Moab was an idolatrous place. Moab and Ammon were children in Abraham's history, but they came from Lot and not from Abraham himself. When Abraham and his family fled Sodom and Gomorrah, and you remember the story, when Abraham and his family fled Sodom and Gomorrah, the city was destroyed, and Lot had his 2 daughters with him and his wife. Well, his wife disobeyed, looked back at the city, and was turned to a pillar of stone. There is a rock formation in that area that people claim very well may be the stone formation of Lot's wife, but we really don't know. What we do know is that Lot was left with his 2 daughters, and finally when they got away from there, the daughters were so desperate and felt so desolate about their futures. They weren't married. They didn't see any hope for children. This was a new experience, you know. They fled the only home they knew. And some of their own family were killed in that destruction. Lot had other children, and they didn't come out. And they were killed in Sodom and Gomorrah. So these daughters felt desolate. We have to be very careful when anything very difficult comes our way and we have to go through any terrors, not to be hasty in our reaction to what's gone on. Never allow ourselves to go into despair, because sometimes that will cause us to abandon the hope that God has given us through who He is and what His promises declare we can have. But these two daughters, on two different occasions, the first occasion, one of his daughters got him drunk so that she could particularly have sexual intercourse with her father, because she wanted to have children to raise up to his name and couldn't see how the family could be continued on if she didn't do this. You see, sometimes people think in the natural, and it's the absolutely the wrong way to go. And she did that. She felt justified. The next day, they got him drunk a second time, and his second daughter had sex with him, and they both became pregnant. Each one of those women had a son. One was named Ammon, and the other was named Moab. The Moabites and the Ammonites became dreadful enemies of Israel. On and off, even though they're some kind of cousins. It was a very difficult relationship, and the Ammonites and the Moabites got into horrendous idol worship. Now, a lot of times when famine comes to a country or a nation, it is brought by the Lord to get the people's attention. I'm not saying all famine is of God, okay? But sometimes it may be. Anyway, in Bethlehem, there came this famine. And isn't it interesting it's Bethlehem? Because Jesus will be born in Bethlehem, won't He? All right? And a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his two sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. And the name of his wife was, it probably is pronounced Naomi, but I will say Naomi because that's what we know the name to be in English. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Epaphrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. That just means they're from a certain section in Judah and in Bethlehem. Now they entered the land of Moab and remained there. So they leave Bethlehem to go into Moab. Well, evidently at this time, there's not a famine in Moab. And can it be that there are friendly relations between Israel and Moab at this time? There might have been, you know. But it's an idolatrous place. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They took for themselves Moabite women as wives. Israel was commanded not to do that, not to take wives from idolatrous nations. But they did. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. Okay, so these are Moabite women. And they lived there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion, they're the husbands of these, the daughters of the sons of Naomi. And they are the husbands of these two women. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died. And the woman was bereft of her two children and her husband. So that's Naomi. Was left without her husband and her two sons. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the land of Moab, for she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them food. So the famine was over. So she departed from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me." That tells me that Naomi had a wonderful relationship with her daughters-in-law. These were young women. She didn't want them to just be stuck. She knew taking them back to Bethlehem, they might not be very well received. You know, they are foreigners, aren't they? Did you know that sometimes people don't treat foreigners very well? And Naomi continues and she says in verse 9, "May the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband." So she sees them marrying again. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. They really loved this woman. She probably had been the kind of mother-in-law you'd like to have as a mother-in-law. And they said to her, "No, but we will surely return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Return, my daughters, go. For I am too old to have a husband, and if I said I have hope, if I should even have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it's harder for me than for you." Now she says something here. She says, "For the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me." Now let's talk about that a minute. Because Naomi said that doesn't mean that's what happened, okay? Sometimes don't we say things that may not be true? We're not saying that just because it appears in the Bible, it has to be something that the Lord told her, all right? This is her reaction. Now, the part of it that is good is that Naomi has a worldview where God is the controller of her life. She believes he can do everything for her. She believes he's the God of Israel. She knows the history of her people. She loves the Lord. And she sees that he has all power. So I guess if all these rotten things happen to me, he must have done it. Well, we have to concede that he allowed it, didn't we? I mean, don't we? All right. But it doesn't mean that he initiated the bad things. You know, in the New Testament, we're told, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you." Well, I think it's the giving of the thanks that's the will of God, not necessarily the bad things that have happened to you. But remember, we're told that he will not test us beyond that which we're able to bear. And with the testing, he will make us a way that when we are, make us a way of escape, that when we are tested, we may be able to bear it. So I think it's in that context we have to see how the Lord is dealing with Naomi. That he's not dealing with her the way she says is happening. And they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Then she said, "Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods." Not a good thing. "Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge, and your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Now, I believe in the time of during that 10-year period when she had these 2 daughter-in-laws, it's very possible that all of them lived in the same house. It might be that there were 2 separate houses, one for each family, and the mother lived with one or the other, or maybe shared occupancy from time to time. But at any rate, they had become very much aware of who Naomi's God was. Then Ruth continues in verse 17. No, she goes on in 16. She says, "For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me." And I do believe that the word for the Lord here is the word we would probably pronounce Yahweh or something close to that. It's the personal name of the Lord. When she saw, that's Naomi, saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. And I think what that means is she didn't nag her about it anymore. Probably she was going, yes. I have to believe she was tickled and felt so blessed that her daughter-in-law wanted to go with her. But she certainly had been a gracious mother-in-law, giving her daughters-in-law the opportunity to go back and do whatever they needed to do. She didn't want them to ever think that she'd force them, I guess, to go with her. But wasn't it wonderful, the impression that this woman had made within the family circle, to where this daughter says, "You're not getting rid of me. No matter what happens, I'm with you." So, verse 19, so they both went until they came to Bethlehem. And isn't it interesting? There's been a famine, hasn't there? You know what the word Bethlehem means? House of bread. Nice place for a famine to end, isn't it? Praise God. So they both went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" You know, they all knew one another. She said to them, don't call me Naomi. See, Naomi means blessed. Or no, it doesn't. It means pleasant, excuse me. Naomi means pleasant. She said, do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Mara means bitter in the Hebrew. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. Again, that's her take on what's going on, right? I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has witnessed against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay? Chapter 2. Now Naomi had a kinsman, a relative of her husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, after one in whose sight I may find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." Now, what's this all about? Well, they didn't have a specific welfare program in Israel, except they did. The poor were given the legal right during the harvest seasons to go behind the reapers in the fields and catch what fell on the ground from the wagons as they were loading them, and as in some cases they were beating off the grain. However it happened, it was while they were harvesting the wheat or the barley that there would be droppings that they'd miss when they put into the wagons what they'd harvested. And the poor were allowed to go behind and pick all that up for free. So that's kind of a welfare system, I guess. But anyway, that's what she does. And so in verse 3, she happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "May the Lord be with you." And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. Now, just think about that a moment. This is a society that is not yet ruled by kings. They're ruled by judges who are certainly deemed to hear from God. So what they have is a society or a nation that is being ruled by God and not man. A theocracy. They're living in a theocracy. So the majority of the Israeli people, it's no big deal. It's not a big deal to hear them speak of the Lord to each other. It's because they live in a society that is honoring God. When they were good, when Israel was in a right relationship with God, they were terrific. When they messed up, they really messed up. Okay. My grandfather used to say if he hadn't been a Christian, if he hadn't found the Lord, he said, I wouldn't have been rotten just a little bit. He said, I'd have gone bad whole hog. So it's very important that the testimony of God is prevalent in a nation for a nation to have any good at all. But here you see the reaction of these people. Some of them are field workers. And for Boaz to say, the Lord bless you, and then they say to him, may the Lord bless you, is a wonderful testimony of that kind of life. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? By the way, Boaz has not married yet. She's pretty, I have a feeling. The servant in charge of the reapers replied, oh, she's the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. Now his wheels are turning. He knows that Naomi is his kinswoman by marriage. He knows that his cousin was her husband and that she's a widow. And so Ruth is going to speak in verse 7. And she said, please let me glean, and after the reapers among the sheaves. Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now. She has been sitting in the house for a little while. You know, you get tired after a while. She went into the shade for a little rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go glean in any other field. Furthermore, do not go out from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? Boaz replied to her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother and in the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. May the Lord reward your work, and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. It's just a wonderful picture. A wonderful picture. Then she said, I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and indeed have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I'm not like one of your maidservants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here, that you may eat of the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied, and had some left over. When she arose again, Boaz commanded his servants, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves. Do not insult her. And so you purposely shall pull out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it that she may glean. Do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned. You can have a picture of this. She's threshing the big sheaves that she's gotten hold of, and all the grain is coming out of them now. She beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Do you know what an ephah is? 22 liters. Think of those liter bottles of soda. 22 of them filled with grain. That's quite a good haul for one day. When I go to the store to buy a bag of flour, you could probably pour most of that 4 pounds. Used to be 5. Remember, Jackie? Used to be 5 pounds. Now it's 4. Anyone listening out there? You could pour most of those 4 pounds in a 1 liter bottle today. That's a lot of grain for an afternoon's work. They wouldn't possibly eat that much right away. She took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also took it out and gave Naomi what she had left after she was satisfied. So she brought lunch home for Naomi. See, she brought what she couldn't finish or what she was able to take off the table. She was allowed to do it, and brought her home some goodies. Her mother-in-law then said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man whom I worked with today is Boaz." Now that's not a big thing for bells to go off in Ruth's mind, but Naomi must be thinking, Boaz, because that was her husband's cousin. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and the dead." She's talking about her understanding of God, having given to her daughter to bless the whole family. And it was because of the memory of the good of her own husband and her 2 sons as well, that God was remembering her family. Again, Naomi said to her, "The man is our relative. He is one of our closest relatives." See, that's a very special thing. Then Ruth the Moabitess said, "Furthermore, he said to me, you should stay close to my servants until they have finished all my harvest." Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his maids, so that the others do not fall upon you in another field." So she stayed close by the maids of Boaz in order to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest. And she lived with her mother-in-law. I think we'll end there. We'll start in chapter 3 next week. It's a wonderful story. A wonderful story. Well, bless you all. I hope that you have a wonderful week. The rest of it remains. And that for those of you who can be here Sunday, we'll look forward to seeing you. And any of you out in TV land here, or computer land, you're welcome too. 4160 Monroe Street, Los Angeles, California, 90029. God bless you. Good night and goodbye.